A house built in 1923 could keep a family cool through a Yorkshire summer with nothing more than a stone floor and a closed curtain. A house built last year with an open concept layout often cannot do the same job, even with air conditioning running all day. I grew up in a stone farmhouse in the Yorkshire Dales, the kind with small rooms and thick walls and doors that were meant to be closed. My grandfather built onto that house with his own hands, and he never once knocked through a wall to make a room feel bigger. He used to say that a house is not a stage, it is a set of tools, and every room is a tool built for one job. I watched that house work through 80 summers before anyone thought to change it, and it never once failed the people living in it. I am sharing what he taught me because most of it has quietly gone out of use, not because it stopped working, but because it stopped being profitable to teach. Somewhere along the way, the idea of small, separate, purposeful rooms was replaced with the idea of one big, open room for everything. Knocking through walls became something builders could sell as an upgrade. An open concept became something estate agents could use to add value to a listing. The result is homes that trap heat from one end to the other, cost more to cool, and give a family nowhere shaded or quiet to go. Builders will tell you that knocking through a wall adds light and adds space, and in a photograph, that is often true. What they will not tell you is what that wall was quietly doing to keep the summer heat out before it came down. I am not asking you to take my word for any of this on faith. What you are about to hear is not a design trend or a decorating opinion. These are layouts that were tested across generations of small English homes by people who had no electric fan, no air conditioning, and no choice but to build a house that could look after itself in the heat. They worked then in houses far smaller than most flats built today, and they still work now. The first thing worth understanding is the scullery and why it was kept apart from the kitchen. In a 1920s English home, the scullery was a small room off the kitchen where the washing up, the vegetable preparation, and the hot, steamy work of cooking actually happened. The kitchen itself stayed relatively cool, used for the finishing touches and for eating simple meals at the table. This meant heat, steam, and the smell of boiling vegetables or frying food stayed contained in one small room with its own ventilation, rather than drifting through the whole house. In a modern open-concept kitchen, that same heat moves straight into the living room and up the stairs because there is no wall left to stop it. A family in 1925 could cook a full meal on a warm afternoon and still have a living room that stayed comfortable by evening. A family today with an open-plan kitchen often finds the whole ground floor several degrees warmer than it needs to be, simply because the heat has nowhere else to go once it is made. The scullery also had its own small window and its own vent, positioned to let hot air escape immediately rather than rise and spread through the rest of the house. None of that heat ever touched the rooms where the family actually sat and rested, because the two jobs were kept in two different rooms on purpose. A simple through draft across a scullery window did the work that an expensive air conditioning unit now tries and often fails to do in an open-planned kitchen. That is only the first part of this, and the next room is one that most people assume disappeared for a reason, when really it disappeared because nobody makes money keeping it around. The second layout worth bringing back is the larder, sometimes called the pantry, and it deserves more attention than it gets, especially in the heat. A larder was typically a small north-facing room or a deep built-in cupboard, often with a stone or slate shelf positioned away from the sun and away from any heat-producing appliance. Because of its position and its thick walls, a well-built larder could stay noticeably cooler than the rest of the house all summer long, sometimes 10 to 15 degrees cooler than a modern kitchen on a hot afternoon. Meat, dairy, bread and butter could be kept there safely through the warmest months, long before refrigeration was common in ordinary homes. During the hot, dry summers of the 1930s, and again in the heat wave of 1976, a working larder was not a luxury. It was the difference between food staying safe and food spoiling within a day. Modern open-concept kitchens have mostly done away with this room entirely, replacing it with a single fridge freezer that has to work far harder every time the outside temperature climbs. That refrigerator becomes one of the largest strains on a small home's energy bill during a heat wave, running almost constantly just to hold its temperature. A cool larder, by contrast, cost nothing extra to run in summer because it used the natural coolness of the house itself, without a single moving part or a single extra penny of electricity. Some larders were built with a small vent to the outside air, covered in fine mesh to keep insects out, which allowed a slow, steady flow of cool air to pass through the room even on the hottest days. Butter, cheese, and cooked meat kept in a larder like this could last far longer than most people today would expect, simply because the temperature never spiked the way it does in a warm, sunlit kitchen. Keep this in mind, because the third method builds directly on this idea of using the house rather than fighting against it. The third thing to understand is the parlor, and why keeping one room shut up during the day was not wasteful at all. The parlor was the best room in the house, kept for visitors, kept for Sunday afternoons, and kept quite deliberately, with its curtains drawn against the midday sun. Because it was closed off during the hottest part of the day, it stayed cool and pleasant for the evening. When the family finally had time to sit in it, this might sound like the opposite of making the most of a room, but it was in fact one of the most efficient habits in the whole house. A family living through the dry summers of the 1930s and the long hot spells of the 1970s understood something that many people have since forgotten, which is that letting sunlight and warm air into every room all day long is one of the most uncomfortable habits a household can have. An open-concept home lets sunlight and warm air pour into every corner of a large connected space all day, whether anyone is in that corner or not. A home built around small, separate rooms allows a family to shut out the sun where it is not needed and open a window only where it is. This single habit, closing curtains during the day and opening windows only at night, was worth more to a family's comfort through a heat wave than almost any other change they could make. During the summer of 1976, one of the driest and hottest on record in England, households with heavy curtains, small windows, and closed doors in unused rooms coped far better than those in newer, more open homes, simply because they could keep the heat out where it was not wanted. That same instinct, keeping the sun out during the day and letting cool air in at night, still works today. Whatever the weather happens to bring, it is simply much harder to practice in a house where the kitchen, the dining area, and the living room have all been merged into a single open space with nothing to close. The fourth layout is the box room, that small extra bedroom found in almost every English terraced or semi-detached house built before the 1960s. It was often no bigger than 8 feet by 8 feet, with a single small window that let in just enough light and just enough air. Modern developers see a room this size as wasted floor space, and many new builds have removed it entirely in favor of one larger open-plan bedroom or a bigger living area. But a box room served a purpose that a large open room cannot, because its small size and single window made it easy to keep shaded and cool through a summer's day. A family living in a small terraced house in the 1930s could give a restless child a genuinely cool room to nap in, simply by drawing one curtain across one small window. An open-concept home with one large flexible space sounds like it should offer the same comfort, but in practice it offers less, because a large room with several windows is far harder to keep shaded and cool than one small room with only one. Many box rooms, being small and easy to seal off, also became the coolest place in the house to store butter, eggs, or preserves during a hot week, tucked away where the sun never reached. A large open-plan room cannot be shaded on one side and left bright on the other, and cannot be quietly turned into the coolest room in the house the way a small box room always could. Keep watching, because the next method is the one that most people are genuinely surprised by, and it has to do with something as simple as a hallway. The fifth thing worth understanding is the entrance hallway and its role as what builders once called a thermal lobby. In a traditional English home, you did not step from the front door directly into the living room. You stepped into a small, enclosed hallway, often no more than a narrow passage with a door at either end, and only then into the main rooms of the house. That small hallway did a quiet but important job in summer, which was to trap the hot air coming in through the front door before it ever reached the rooms where the family was sitting. Every time that front door opens in a modern open-concept home, warm outside air rushes straight into the kitchen, the living room, and sometimes the stairs, because there is no buffer room to stop it. Building surveyors still measure something called heat gain through door openings, and a proper enclosed hallway can reduce that gain significantly, compared with a home where the front door opens directly into open-plan living space. This is not a small effect over the course of a heat wave, particularly in a small house where every room is close to an exterior wall to begin with. Many hallways of this kind also stay dim and tiled rather than carpeted, which kept them naturally cooler and stopped that heat from ever settling into the main living space at all. A narrow hallway with 2 doors might seem like wasted square footage to a modern estate agent, but to a family trying to stay cool, it was doing real work every single day, whether anyone in the house ever thought about it or not. The 6th method concerns internal doors themselves and the habit of actually using them to control airflow. A 1920s house was built with a door on nearly every room, including rooms that seemed small enough not to need one, like a box room or a scullery. This was not an accident of old-fashioned design. It was a deliberate way of giving a family control over where their cool air, their warm air, and their smells went at any given moment. Open a window on one side of the house at night. Open a window on the far side, and leave the doors between them open to create a through draft that pulls cool night air across every room. Then, once the sun rises, close those same doors and windows to trap that cool air inside before the heat of the day can get in. An open concept layout removes this control entirely, because there are no doors left to close once the cool morning air has done its job. Everything that happens in one part of the space, the heat of an oven, the warmth of a sunlit window, the smell of cooking, moves freely through the entire home, whether the rest of the household wants it to or not. Even the doors themselves were built with purpose, often solid wood rather than the hollow. Lightweight doors common in many homes today, which meant they blocked far more heat than people tend to assume. A solid internal door, kept shut through the hottest hours of the afternoon, can noticeably reduce the temperature of a room compared with an open doorway leading into a large connected space. This lack of control is rarely mentioned by anyone selling open-plan renovations because it does not photograph well and it does not fit neatly into a listing description. The 7th thing worth learning from these older homes is how they used alcoves and built-in furniture, instead of large open floor space. Many 1920s rooms had a fireplace with an alcove on either side, and those alcoves, tucked against thick brick, stayed some of the coolest spots in the house through summer. This meant storage did not need to compete with living space, and it meant food, linen, and anything sensitive to heat could be kept in the coolest corner of the room without a single moving part. A small room fitted this way could keep as much protected from the heat as a much larger open-plan room fitted with freestanding furniture simply because nothing was wasted or left exposed to the sun. Modern open-concept homes tend to rely on freestanding furniture. Large sofas and kitchen islands, often positioned near large windows that pour direct sunlight onto them for most of the day. The result is that many open-plan homes, despite having more total square footage in one connected space, actually feel hotter and more uncomfortable in summer than a small 1920s house half their size. A built-in cupboard beside a chimney breast, shaded and set back from any window, could hold food or linen at a steady, cool temperature without ever needing to be moved. Because these cupboards and shelves were built into thick walls rather than standing near glass, they never absorbed the afternoon sun the way modern freestanding furniture so often does. This is the kind of detail that never comes up when someone is trying to sell you on the idea that bigger and more open automatically means better. The 8th method is about the fireplace itself and how the chimney was quietly put to work even when no fire was lit. In a traditional layout, the main rooms of the house were built close to the chimney breast, often sharing a single chimney stack between 2 rooms on different floors. With the fire unlit through summer, that same chimney became a natural ventilation shaft, drawing warm air up and out of the house through simple convection, since hot air always rises toward the open flue. Opening a small vent near the hearth on a warm day could pull stale, hot air out of a room steadily, without any fan and without any electricity at all. Modern open-concept homes often seal up or remove the chimney entirely, relying instead on a central air conditioning unit to shift the same warm air around a much larger connected space. This works, but it uses far more energy to achieve a similar result because it is cooling air mechanically rather than using the natural behavior of heat rising through a shared structure. Bricklayers of that era understood that a chimney breast holds and channels air long after any fire has gone out, and they built rooms tight against that structure for exactly this reason. A bedroom built near a chimney breast with its vent open could stay noticeably more comfortable overnight than a bedroom on the far side of an open-plan house, simply because stale, warm air had somewhere to go. Open-concept homes with their high ceilings and their single large cooling source rarely take advantage of this kind of natural airflow, and the heat they generate has a much larger space to clear before anyone actually feels the difference. The ninth thing worth knowing is how these small, separated rooms handled more than one generation, living under the same roof, especially through a hot summer. Many English homes built in the 1920s and 1930s were designed with the understanding that a grandparent, a young couple, and eventually children might all live under one roof at different points. During a heat wave, the coolest room in the house, often the larder or a shaded box room, could be given over to whoever needed it most. An elderly relative struggling with the heat, or a baby who could not regulate their own temperature yet. This flexibility came directly from having several small, closable rooms rather than one large open one, because each room could be reassigned to whoever needed the coolest or shadiest spot that week. An open-concept home, however comfortable it looks in a photograph, struggles to offer this same flexibility, because most of its living space shares the same heat, the same sunlight, and the same air. When a heat wave arrives and someone in the household needs a genuinely cool place to rest, a house built from small, separate rooms simply adapts more icily than a house built as one large connected space. A house with several small, shaded rooms could quietly absorb these needs summer after summer, while a house built around one grand open space had far less give in it when the temperature climbed. The 10th and final thing to understand is what all of this meant for comfort and for privacy in the warmer months, which is something rarely discussed by anyone selling a renovation. Solid internal walls, even relatively thin ones, do a great deal to keep one room's warmth from spreading into another, especially a room that has caught the afternoon sun. In a small 1920s terraced house, a child resting in the box room did not have to share the heat building up in a sun-facing living room next door. An open-concept layout removes almost all of this natural separation, which is why so many families living in newly renovated open-plan homes report that the house feels hotter and stuffier in summer than it did before the walls came down, not cooler and more pleasant as they had been promised. Comfort within a small home is not a small thing, particularly during a heat wave, when every member of a family is looking for somewhere cool and quiet to sit. A house built from several small rooms gives every member of a family somewhere shaded to go. A house built as one large open room gives them nowhere at all. This matters as much for a working adult trying to nap during an afternoon off as it does for a child trying to sleep on a warm night, or a grandparent trying simply to stay comfortable through a long, hot week. No amount of clever furniture placement in an open-plan space can fully replace what a plain plaster wall, a drawn curtain, and a closed door once did without any effort at all. I think about my grandfather's house often, and how little it needed to keep a family comfortable in summer as much as winter. It was never a large house, and by modern standards, it would be considered small, even cramped in places. But it was arranged with a kind of quiet intelligence, where every room, every door, and every wall was doing a specific job, and nothing was wasted just to make the place look impressive. What was lost when open concept became the fashion was not simply a few walls. It was a whole way of thinking about a house as a set of working tools, rather than a single empty stage. That way of thinking costs nothing to bring back, because it does not require a renovation at all. Only a willingness to use the rooms and the doors a small home already has, or to think carefully before removing them. You do not need a stone cottage in the Dales to use any of this. Drawing a curtain before the sun hits a window, using a cool cupboard instead of running a fridge harder than it needs to run, opening windows on opposite sides of the house at night instead of running a fan all day. These are habits, not renovations, and habits cost nothing to start. My grandfather never once described his house as clever or old-fashioned. To him, it was simply built sensibly by people who had no choice but to think carefully about every wall they put up. That is worth remembering the next time someone tells you that knocking a wall down is automatically an improvement. A small house arranged with care has always been able to do more for a family through a hot summer than a large house, arranged without any thought at all, and that was as true in 1923 as it remains today. If this is useful to you, there are more methods where this came from. I share a new one every day. The old ways are still here. You just have to know where to look.